Imagine standing at the edge of a battlefield, not one of swords and shields, but of minds and souls. The air is thick with unseen forces, the kind that shape destinies without a single outward blow. You are a warrior not of Sparta, but of your own psyche, and before you lies a choice: to step forward into the fray of self-discovery or retreat into the safety of illusion. This is the battlefield Carl Jung warned us about. Not the clash of armies, but the silent war within every person. The war between who they appear to be and what they truly are. And in this war there is one sign, one fatal flaw that reveals a person's deepest danger, not just to themselves, but to anyone who crosses their path. The more someone claims to be whole, the more broken they are. You've met them before. The charismatic leader whose confidence never wavers. The friend who insists they have no regrets, no shadows, no hidden wounds. The lover who claims to be perfectly self-assured, needing nothing from you, yet demanding everything. On the surface, they seem invincible, but beneath, a void, a refusal to acknowledge the darkness within. And that, Jung would argue, is the most dangerous sign in any person. Why? Because the human psyche is not meant to be a monolith of light. It is a tapestry of contradictions, love and rage, creation and destruction, saint and sinner. To deny one half is to fracture the whole, and a fractured soul, when left unexamined, becomes a weapon. Think of history's most destructive figures. They were not those who wrestled with their demons, but those who pretended their demons did not exist. The tyrant who believed himself a savior, the manipulator who thought himself a saint, the narcissist who mistook his reflection for divinity. Here's the urgent question. What happens when a person refuses to see their shadow? Jung called it the shadow, the repressed, denied, or hidden aspects of the self. The parts we deem unacceptable, our rage, our envy, our selfishness, our primal instincts. But here's the terrifying truth. The shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It grows stronger in the dark. And when a person refuses to acknowledge their darkness, it doesn't vanish. It possesses them. It leaks out in cruel jokes disguised as honesty. In sudden outbursts of rage they later dismiss. In manipulation they call helping. In control they call love. Ask yourself, have you ever met someone who never admits fault? Someone who is always the hero of their own story, never the villain? Someone whose kindness feels like a transaction, whose love feels like a cage? If so, you've encountered a person at war with their own shadow, and that war will spill onto everyone around them. Spot this warning sign. When certainty replaces curiosity, the most dangerous people are not those who question themselves, but those who never do. They do not wonder, could I be wrong? They do not ask, what if I am the problem? Instead, they project, they blame, they rewrite reality to fit their narrative. And in doing so, they become ticking time bombs, unaware of their own fragility, convinced of their own infallibility. This is the warning Jung implored us to heed. Beware the person who claims to have no shadow, for they have not conquered their darkness. They have merely locked it away where it festers, grows, and one day erupts. So will you face the shadow or flee from it? This is where the true battle lies. Not in fighting others, but in facing yourself. Because the alternative is far worse. A life of unconscious destruction, where every relationship, every ambition, every moment of joy is tainted by the parts of you that you refuse to see. But here's the twist. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your untamed power, your repressed creativity, your denied strength. To face it is not to be destroyed, but to become whole. And yet most will never dare. Most would rather live a half-life than confront the abyss within. Which will you choose? Because the next step is even more unsettling. Understanding why we run from our shadows in the first place, and the psychological trap that keeps us from true self-awareness. But that is a revelation for the next battle. You stand at the edge of the abyss, not the one outside, but the one within. The darkness that whispers in your quietest moments, the parts of yourself you've been taught to bury. Why? because society rewards the illusion of wholeness and punishes the admission of fracture. But this is not a flaw of the individual alone. It is a sickness woven into the fabric of civilization itself. Why we fear the shadow and have the illusion of wholeness. From childhood, we are conditioned to disown our darkness. Good children don't get angry. Strong leaders never show doubt. Moral people never admit to envy or lust. We are taught to amputate the messy, chaotic, and primal parts of ourselves, not because it makes us better, but because it makes us easier to control. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this centuries ago. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster. And when you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. But here's the tragedy. Most never even look into the abyss. They plaster over it with affirmations, with rigid ideologies, with performative virtue. And in doing so, they become hollow. Carl Jung warned of the persona, the mask we wear for the world. A necessary facade, yes, but one that becomes a prison when we mistake it for our true face. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the act of lying to oneself to escape the discomfort of freedom. The businessman who defines himself only by his title. The parent who sacrifices all individuality for the role of caregiver. The activist who preaches love while secretly seething with hatred for dissenters. They are not evil, they are asleep, and an asleep mind is the most dangerous force on earth. We arrive to Shadow's revenge, when what you deny controls you. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of relentless pessimism, understood this well. A man can do what he wills, but not will what he wills. In other words, you do not control what you refuse to acknowledge. The man who claims he is never angry will one day erupt in violence he cannot explain. The woman who denies her envy will sabotage others while believing herself a saint. The leader who refuses to admit doubt will lead his followers off a cliff, convinced of his own infallibility. This is the shadow's revenge. It does not disappear. It possesses. Also, we have the collective shadow, society's unconscious cruelty. But the problem goes deeper than the individual. Entire cultures have shadows, repressed histories, collective traumas, denied atrocities. Aldous Huxley saw this in Brave New World, a society so addicted to pleasure and distraction that it willingly enslaved itself. Viktor Frankl saw it in the Holocaust, the banality of evil, where ordinary men committed atrocities because they refused to question authority. Today we see it in the politician who preaches family values while destroying his own, the corporation that claims to care while exploiting millions, the mob that tears down statues in the name of justice but refuses to confront its own cruelty. This is the shadow on a mass scale, and it is far more dangerous than any individual's darkness. Now the psychological trap, why we'd rather be right than free. Cognitive dissonance, the mind's refusal to hold two conflicting truths, keeps us locked in denial. It is easier to believe a comforting lie than to face a painful truth. This is why the abusive partner believes he is the victim. The corrupt leader thinks he is saving the nation. The fanatic is convinced his violence is holy. They are not merely lying to others. They are lying to themselves, and that lie becomes their reality. So here is the point of no return. This is where the danger peaks. When a person or a society reaches the stage where they would rather destroy everything than admit they were wrong, the shadow has won. History's greatest tragedies were not caused by those who knew they were evil, but by those who believed they were good. So the question is no longer, do you have a shadow? But rather, are you brave enough to face it? Because the consequences of refusing? That's where the true horror begins. You've seen the signs. You've felt the unease, that subtle tension when someone's words don't match their energy, when their smile doesn't reach their eyes. But what happens when the shadow remains unexamined? When denial hardens into something far more sinister? The answer lies not in dramatic outbursts, but in the slow, quiet erosion of reality itself. The first casualty of a repressed shadow is truth. A man who refuses to acknowledge his anger will, instead of saying, "I'm furious," say, "I'm just being honest," when he's cruel. "You're too sensitive," when he's callous. "I'm doing this for you," when he's controlling. This is how the shadow operates, not through obvious villainy, but through plausible deniability. It twists language, warps perception, and rewrites history until even the person themselves believes their own lies. And if they can deceive themselves, imagine what they can do to you. That's where narcissism epidemic comes. Jung warned that the shadow, when ignored, inflates the ego to compensate. A person who cannot admit flaws doesn't become perfect, they become delusional. They construct a godlike self-image, and anyone who challenges it becomes an enemy. This is the birth of narcissism, not the healthy confidence of someone who knows their worth, but the fragile grandiosity of someone who cannot face their worthlessness. And in an age of social media, where personas are curated, where vulnerability is punished, where perfection is demanded, this sickness is spreading like wildfire. The most dangerous groups in history weren't those led by self-aware tyrants, but by true believers, those utterly convinced of their own righteousness. Religious fanatics who murder in the name of love, political extremists who destroy lives while claiming to save them, corporate empires that exploit millions while preaching community. These are not anomalies. They are the inevitable result of collective shadow possession. When an entire group denies its darkness, it becomes capable of atrocities with a clear conscience. Look into the bystander effect on a planetary scale. Why do so many see evil and do nothing? Because acknowledging the shadow in others forces us to confront it in ourselves. It's easier to scroll past injustice than admit we're complicit, laugh at a cruel joke than confront our own cruelty, obey immoral orders than risk being ostracized. This is how societies collapse, not with a bang, but with a million small surrenders of conscience. The ultimate irony is that the good people are the most dangerous. The thief knows he's a thief. The liar knows he's a liar. But the saint who denies his own capacity for evil, he will burn the world to prove his purity. This is the horror Jung foresaw. Not that we are all secretly monstrous, but that those who believe themselves incapable of monstrosity are the ones who unleash it. And now, the critical question remains: how do we break free? Because the alternative isn't just personal suffering, it's the unraveling of everything meaningful in our world. The realization dawns like a blade cutting through fog. You are not trapped by your shadow. You are trapped by your refusal to face it. But here lies the paradox. The moment you stop running, the shadow loses its power. This is not about fixing yourself. It is about reclaiming yourself. Nietzsche proclaimed, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." Your anger, your lust, your selfishness, these are not sins. They are unrefined power. The man who denies his aggression becomes either a doormat or a tyrant. The woman who suppresses her desires becomes either a martyr or a manipulator. The goal is not to eradicate these forces, but to alchemize them. Ayn Rand was half right. Selfishness is not the problem. Unconscious selfishness is. The parent who sacrifices everything for their children will grow resentful. The activist who burns out for the cause will become tyrannical. You must first be whole to give without poison. Integration means some will reject you, not because you've become worse, but because you've become real. The people who loved your mask will rage when they see your face. Let them. This is where the path splits. Continue pretending and remain a prisoner of your own illusions, or face the shadow and become something far more dangerous, a truly free human. The choice is yours. But know this, the final revelation changes everything. Here is the secret no guru will tell you. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is your unlived life. Every repressed impulse, every denied desire, every exiled emotion, they were never evil. They were suppressed resources. Jung's greatest insight: I would rather be whole than good. Your rage channeled becomes unshakable boundaries. Your envy transformed becomes aspiration. Your selfishness honed becomes self-respect. The shadow doesn't make you monstrous. Hiding it does. So here is the antidote to modern madness. In a world demanding perfection, your darkness is your salvation. The people who change history aren't those without flaws, they're those who use them. Make sure to make the Spartan choice. Now you stand at the edge, not of a battlefield, but of your own soul. Will you keep fighting a war against yourself, or pick up the discarded pieces and become something unstoppable? The shadow awaits, not to destroy you, but to complete you.